former leader Andrew Scheer saying Justin Trudeau's the, quote, the biggest threat to freedom in Canada.
There is a warning tonight to members of Parliament from the man responsible for security at the House of Commons as convoys of protesters head to the nation's capital. Canadians line the streets as vehicles passed. This has grown from a small, focused protest into something bigger, moving beyond a fight against vaccine mandates. Tonight, we have the latest from the cross-country journey that's building momentum here in Canada and beyond, and raising concerns about inflammatory rhetoric. We'll also look at the political and security consequences as the demonstration rolls closer to Ottawa. Kayla Hounsell begins our coverage tonight, tracking multiple convoys in different parts of the country and how Ottawa is preparing for their arrival.
It started before the sun was up. First in the east.
Well, there's no hate speech, there's no we and they, there's no vax and anti-vax. It's the freedom to choose our own destiny.
Truckers came from Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland, gathering first in Nova Scotia. Only around a dozen trucks, but a couple hundred people showed up to support them. They picked up more in New Brunswick before heading to Ontario. It began as a protest supporting truckers against vaccine mandates.
Oh, I'm grateful. I wouldn't expect so many people.
That's led to a warning in the nation's capital. In an email obtained by CBC News, the Sergeant-at-Arms responsible for parliamentary security told MPs protesters might show up at their homes. This is known as doxing, a process of finding and publishing personal information about a particular individual on the internet, usually with malicious intent, he wrote.
Everybody has their own reasons why they're here, whether it's, to get rid of mandates, whether it's for freedom, whatever it is.
The Canadian Trucking Alliance says it is opposed to the convoy, but support is growing across the country and online. $6 million and counting has been raised. GoFundMe was holding it back until organizers could produce a plan, but today released $1 million to cover fuel costs.
So it's awesome. By God, it's bringing a lot of people together. Unity is what we need in this country.
Ottawa police say they are preparing, but they don't know how many protesters might show up or how long they might stay.
Saturday, until everyone leaves there, I'll be there. I'm stacked. I have everything there. I got food, I got water, and I'm going to wait it out.
Demanding the federal government reverse the vaccine mandate. The government says it will not back down. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
The convoy is attracting supporters with a wide range of views, some more extreme than others, including some Americans with massive platforms. Katie Nicholson has that part of the story.
It may have started with some truckers upset by the cross-border vaccine mandate, but it's morphed into a rallying cry for people with a variety of grievances.
Stop forcing this needle into us. We don't want it. We don't need it.
Ranging from anti-government to anti-mask viewpoints.
Remove the muzzle. The mask doesn't protect against any stupid little virus.
Freedom is a repeated refrain. Those who keep tabs on the spread of misinformation online say it's a trend.
We're seeing the phrase freedom of expression being used in the context of efforts to fight misinformation. And what they're really doing is they're using these ideologically appealing notions in order to push misinformation.
The convoy even picking up endorsements from some with huge international platforms who faced criticism for spreading COVID-19 misinformation. Like Elon Musk tweeting, "Canadian truckers rule," and podcaster Joe Rogan.
It's a giant convoy of trucks that's apparently some insane amount of people, like 50,000 trucks.
Well, perhaps not that many trucks.
This is really hard to put a number on, but I will say this, there have been claims that there will be 50,000 big rigs, and that's just not viable.
And there's frustration from truckers not in the protest.
I have had drivers call me repeatedly today saying that they're frustrated that they can't go about doing their job because the minority's ruling the day on the road.
He says roughly 90% of the trucking industry is fully vaccinated.
This has been hijacked by some people that are not directly related to the trucking industry, and I'd rather say to them, go have your own party and your own protest and let us go about doing our jobs.
The convoy is set to roll into Ottawa on Saturday. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, politicians are taking part in the conversation over the convoy, and in the past 48 hours, starkly different messages coming from the federal government and the opposition.
The question is, why would Prime Minister Trudeau not stand up for working people? The convoy itself is becoming a symbol of the fatigue and the division we're seeing in this country.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views.
Justin Trudeau has faced criticism for the tone of those comments. Meanwhile, Aaron O'Toole said tonight that he'll meet with some of the truckers in the convoy. So let's bring in Chief Political Correspondent with CBC News, Rosemary Barton, to talk about the politics of support. And Rosie, what is Aaron O'Toole's strategy here?
Well, as you said, Ian, he has said that he'll meet with part of the convoy, though he's not going to do that on Parliament Hill, and he really wants it to be with truckers. He's trying to position himself very much as defender of Canadian workers. At the same time, tonight he made it clear he was not. He wanted to see no violence at this event. He is in many ways trying to have it always with all sides. He's for vaccines, but against vaccine mandates. That's been his position for some time. But he has also made it clear he wants to stand up for fundamental principles for the Conservative Party, personal choice and freedom. But as he calls for politicians to take down the temperature, he then has members of his own caucus using really inflammatory language about this issue, calling it a vaccine vendetta. The former leader, Andrew Scheer, saying Justin Trudeau's, the biggest threat to freedom in Canada. So a lot of what is happening here with Aaron O'Toole has a lot to do with growing calls for his leadership review, too.
And on the flip side, the Prime Minister has faced criticism for his statement yesterday.
Yeah, this is the other side of the politics. How closely can the government connect this convoy to the Conservatives? That certainly worked for them, that kind of thing during the election. There is a risk here that those comments fuel the frustration some people are obviously feeling. The other risk is that they seem insensitive to the people whose lives are actually being affected by vaccine mandates, by losing their jobs or having their jobs changed. I think the calculation from the government here is that the political risk for the Prime Minister is very small because the overwhelming majority of Canadians support mandates, and of course, most Canadians are also vaccinated.
Okay, Rosemary, and of course you'll be back with the At Issue panel to talk more about this in about 20 minutes. The Prime Minister says he's isolating for 5 days after being exposed to COVID. Justin Trudeau says his rapid test result was negative. Prime Minister saying that he's feeling fine and will work from home. Spokesperson from his office says the exposure came after a news conference late yesterday.
Small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other.
Let's take the temperature down. Let's propose solutions. Let's make sure nobody loses their house, their family, their livelihood in a crisis.
Okay, political leaders addressing the cross-Canada convoy, protesting COVID restrictions, public health mandates, and the federal government. That convoy arriving on Parliament Hill tomorrow and into Saturday. There are some concerns, obviously, about what could happen when it gets here. But what do we make of the political response? It's Thursday. I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good to see everyone. Obviously, lots of different parts of this story. Maybe we will start with the Prime Minister and his comments from yesterday. I think a lot of people were asking questions about how far he went, too, in talking about the groups that we are expecting to show up on Parliament Hill. Chantal, was there any risk in his comments?
I think the risks are fairly small, in as much as this is the organizers of this protest seem to go out of their way to provide comments, as in we are going to ask the Governor General to dissolve Parliament and appoint us to rule the country. We will not leave until every health measure in every province and every city is done with. Go down the list. This is so far off from a protest from the 10% of truckers who are not vaccinated that I don't think there was much of a risk to Justin Trudeau there.
Okay, so let's flip to the other side there, and I'll come back to you, Chantal, for your take too. But Andrew, in terms of how the Conservatives are handling this, whether it be what Mr. O'Toole said today, obviously calling for no violence, or things that his MPs have said.
Well, let's start with the MPs, and we're not just talking about, fringe backbenchers here. We're talking about people like Pierre Poilievre. We're talking people like Candice Bergen, who have been giving aid and comfort to the rally itself. And it is hard to winnow out the sort of good-hearted but confused protesters when some of the organizers themselves, as Chantal mentioned, have been spouting not just lunatic theories about how the government and Constitution works, but in some cases, media contacts have been making terribly vile attacks on journalists, and in some cases, some of the participants have been spitting on them or attacking them physically. Why any Conservative MP would want to get anywhere within 1,000 miles of that kind of group, with the potential for things to get much worse on the weekend, is a bit of a mystery, except that you have a faction within the Conservative Party that sees advantage in appealing to this group, or who are at the very least concerned that that group is going to be going towards the People's Party. Mr. O'Toole himself today was, I think, not exactly on message in terms of distancing himself and his party from that kind of approach to things and those kinds of views. He seemed, if anything, to be cozying up to them in his own way. This is not going to be good for the Conservative Party in the slightest. This is going to lead the party into a very bad way. That this is not where the general public of Canada wants to be anywhere near.
Well, that's what I find perplexing too, Althea, is that the vast majority of Canadians do not reflect the kinds of things that are being said here. They support vaccine mandates and are vaccinated.
That's true. I think there's a few things at play. Let's start with Erin O'Toole. I think what we saw this week is that there is a leadership vacuum in the Conservative Party. And so you have people like Andrew Scheer and Candice Bergen and Garnet Genuis and Pierre Poilievre, who've come in and who've filled the void, trying to direct the party where they want it to go. And Mr. O'Toole, very early in the week, I think it was on Monday, staked out a very clear position, refusing to say whether or not he was going to meet with the truckers, actually saying that he didn't think it was the leader of the official opposition's role to meet with any protesters on Parliament Hill, and refusing to say whether or not he supported them. And then again, very similar to the election campaign, there was pressure. They had very interesting, rambunctious 2 days of caucus meeting, and he comes out with a new position where he will meet with some truckers, not the organizers of this group, because for the reasons I think Chantal outlined, and he will not meet with them on Parliament Hill, but he will meet with the truckers off Parliament Hill somewhere. Surely we'll have a photo opportunity to convey a message that he wants to convey, which is really to have it on both sides, to be supportive of the truckers movement, but also warning, please be peaceful demonstrators. We don't want any extremist, white nationalist, racist, misogynist comments on Parliament.
Chantal.
Okay, there are two facts that seem to be absent from the discourse on both sides of this. The first is the 90% of truckers who happen to be vaccinated, fact. The other fact is, suppose tomorrow, and it's not going to happen, that Justin Trudeau suddenly caves. He won't. That will not get a single one of the truckers who are demonstrating and coming to Ottawa on Saturday across the border, because the same rule applies to them as they cross the border.
That's right.
One, on the politics of it, when your deputy leader, your predecessor, and your finance critic do not wait for your cue to fan fires that will be burning your own party, you have lost all moral authority, and that is the only comment I can make on Erin O'Toole at this point.
I'll just end with you, Andrew, and then we're going to talk more about Mr. O'Toole in the next block. But is this not a lesson, though, that the Conservative Party should have taken from the election? Because this is the way that the Liberals sort of played them on some of these issues during the election.
Well, and from before the election, from the Yellow Jackets, that business, you've got a section of the party and a section of the parliamentary caucus, including the people we've mentioned, who are quite willing to play with this kind of fire. And they are, in my opinion, disqualifying themselves from public, position of public trust. If you cannot disavow and distance yourself, first of all, from the kind of extremism that we're seeing among some of the elements here, but secondly, look, there's a difference between not demonizing people who are anti-vaccination or anti-vaccine mandates, and people like to draw distinctions between them that I don't think are really terribly tenable. There's a difference between not demonizing them and pretending that there's some kind of valid basis to their objections, and saying that people are losing their jobs, for no reason, supposedly. All they have to do is get themselves vaxxed. It is not a terrible imposition. It is not an assault on their rights. And somebody has to be able to say that without, as I say, at the same time demonizing. This should not be that hard for people who are in politics, after all.
Okay, I got to take a quick break. Althea, you can start us off on the next round. We'll talk more about this, but also